And although it's not, he's not making any money off of that, but Limbo is another one of these games that is, absolutely artful and compelling in many ways. Dino, I think, is giving a talk later this afternoon after lunch on the creation of the game. It's visually stunning, but also the gameplay and what it sort of says about, this kind of trial and error rather, where you just keep dying and you keep struggling to save your sister and so on. But so there's something in the interactivity itself that speaks to the art form. It speaks to the medium, as opposed to just the sort of the visual aesthetic, which is also extremely compelling. Then you have somewhat more. I wouldn't call this one a blockbuster. This is Shadow of the Colossus, which many refer to as one of the sort of the masterworks of our form. Was released a few years ago. This was the sort of spiritual sequel to Ico or Eco, which also is really sort of a masterwork of games. This one was released on console. It didn't really have a huge commercial success, but was a massive critical success and won many awards. But again, it's sort of a question of what kind of games does the mainstream industry allow to be created. And so then you start thinking about economic impact. And you look at a game like Grand Theft Auto. This is an old screenshot from GTA 3. Arguably one of the most economically successful game franchises of all time. Hundreds of millions of dollars in sales for the series. But this too is a work of art in many ways. Is sort of a masterwork of what games can be or are. I don't know if most people would sort of consider that to be the case, but then we start thinking about impact. What impact have games had? And oftentimes economics or financial impact is one of the first things that come up. Yesterday there was a bunch of quotes about sort of the overall economic impact, the sort of billions of dollars, the total value, shareholder value of the companies that are publicly listed. Phil gave some numbers yesterday morning. I forget what his number was, 105 billion and 60 billion of sales and all this kind of stuff. So economic impact is certainly one that often comes up. Then we start looking at other impacts that we've had, and certainly the new gestural-based controllers have actually had I would say, an impact on our health. Wii Fit being the most sort of famous case where they sold, I forget how many, but millions of those. And you look at Kinect and the effect that that's having, and even earlier games like Dance Dance Revolution, which are those ones were not necessarily intended to make you fit, but certainly did help get kids off the couch. And then you look, even broader still at some uses of games for more serious applications. This is a game called Fold It, which is amazingly enough about folding proteins and trying to find ideal combinations of proteins. And this was a game produced by researchers in the U.S. Who figured that the heuristic nature of folding a protein actually was game-like. And if they gave this over to gamers who knew how to manipulate sort of objects in 3D space, they'd probably do pretty good at it. And they were right in terms of how they sort of turned a game out of this particular research problem. And there's actually been a lot written up on this if it's of interest. But kids playing this game and sort of finding solutions to the folding of certain proteins in some cases did better than actual researchers and academics who used more traditional means for finding solutions to to folding proteins. So we're starting to see these sort of more serious applications of games. That's actually a screenshot from a game called Pulse that was created for, I think, military doctors who were trying to do training for in-field operations. Here he's doing some kind of surgical operation, but the game was more about diagnosis. And so there's a whole sort of NPC AI simulation that went through that enabled the doctors to more easily analyze people who would come into the operating area and figure out did they have anthrax or whatever. So more of a analysis tool. And then even silly stuff like doing chores. where there's this sort of online role-playing game called Chore Wars, where you get points for, making your bed. I mean, this is maybe more directed towards kids, right, for doing your laundry and cleaning up your room and setting the table and so on. And there's a few others along these lines. Another popular one is called Epic Win, where they're trying to encourage, behavior in this sense. And then you even have, political games. This one, obviously, very famous to most Italians, I think, from Mullen Industria, where games are being used, almost in sort of a propagandistic way, whether, good or bad propaganda, to sort of, use it to make political type arguments or social arguments. There's a lot of examples of this. I thought, these guys do a lot of interesting stuff. And this is another, there's really endless amount of examples. This is a game, it's called A Force More Powerful. It was funded by a nonprofit organization that's trying to support citizens in regions that have oppressive governmental regimes. And it's a game that allows, kind of like, it's a sim game that allows you to simulate ways to overthrow your oppressive government without using violence. And so, by rallying and media attention and so on. And they released this game, free online. It was downloaded by people in these regions with oppressive governments on how maybe they might explore or create some strategies on how to overthrow their government. So, games and sort of this play ethic, trial and error and so on are being used in these, I would say, pretty significant or impactful ways. And then even stuff like this is the dashboard in the Prius, the electric car from Prius is Toyota, I guess. And several cars have this, where almost the idea of fuel economy becomes a game where you're trying to maximize your fuel efficiency. There's like leaderboards online in terms of what your maximum kilometers per liter of gas you can do and so on. And I mean, this screenshot here, maybe this picture here doesn't do justice to how sort of playful the diagram is and how it gives you feedback, and it almost becomes this sort of game as you're driving. And so games are sort of having this effect on even fuel consumption and the improvement of the earth. And so you start thinking about the impact games have had on society, and there's all kinds of sort of cultural signposts or references. This is a picture from Video Games Live, which in my opinion is one of those sort of signposts. This is a music tour that's been going now probably for 3 or 4 years, where they go to cities all over the world and they're playing game music, from Mario and Final Fantasy and Halo and so on and so on. I don't know if they've been to Italy or not. I'm guessing I think they have been, but and they pack theaters and auditoriums and they sell out every show that they do. And this sort of is a marker of that cultural significance. Then this is one of the Invader mosaics in Rome. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this, but there's an artist called Invader, a French artist, who goes around various cities and puts up these little mosaics all over the place. Most of them are in France, but he has several all over Europe and the U.S. And I spotted a few of them walking around in Rome. And again, this is sort of, it's so kind of out there, but it still is a marker of this kind of cultural significance, that this artist would be inspired to use that as kind of his basis or his muse, as it were. And then for, citizens to be, wandering around just discovering these little markers as kind of an inside joke in many ways. I can only imagine what someone who didn't know what Space Invaders would come across that and wonder, what that was. But again, this is just sort of very, very random sort of little examples. And then you have something in New York called Baby Castles, which is kind of like an artist's installation, kind of a communal space for game creators and game players and game artists that come together, and they have jams and they play games and they just do really interesting things. And they have different stuff that they do sort of on a weekly or monthly basis, semi-curated and so on. But that couldn't exist if that sense of game culture and community you know, what wasn't present, if the games didn't have that